This week, we go off the beaten path as we continue our Hidden Places series. Our journey takes us to a quarry. My colleague Sarah Whitmire joins us now. Sarah, the limestone quarry that you're going to take us to shows us how quarrying was done in its boom days from the 1920s, though really through the current period.
The quarry is no longer in operation, but it is still completely intact. It's not only a journey to a hidden place, but also kind of a journey back in time to the peak of limestone production in Indiana.
Duncan Campbell is a trained historic preservationist, so when he came into possession of an old quarry, it was like he just won the lottery.
All the derricks, a lot of the machinery, the blacksmith shop, the cables, the cutting wire, everything was still right there on the site. They had been kind of left behind with the idea that the company would probably reopen them at some point. And then the owner of the company passed away, and the man who managed it and ran it decided to retire. And so the heirs of that company, the first quarry company, decided to sell the property.
We can't say exactly where the property is because it wouldn't be safe for people to try to find it, and they could end up getting hurt. But the quarry is on the west side of Bloomington. You can't see it from the road, but Campbell guides us back, snaking around some trees and tall grass.
We sort of keep the pathway clear, but this is where the railroad came in. That's why the derricks are proximate to that, within reach of that, so they can load rail cars. So we can go out this way. You'll start to see quarries pretty quickly.
Several hundred people worked here when this quarry was operational.
They were so desperate for labor during the boom period, they couldn't train enough local people to do all the work. And now, of course, that's quite different with our technologies. But they were importing labor, skilled labor from England, Hungary, Italy, places where stone cutting had been, in the history of the culture for many centuries, because they needed skilled labor. And they used those people in the mills as well as in the quarries.
The 1930-1940 census shows more than 60 Italians living at this site. In reality, they didn't live here, but they did spend nearly all of their time working here. Carol Fianzi's great-grandfather was one of those immigrants from Italy.
The immigrants who came early, of course, there were no labor laws. So life was very rough for the immigrants. And my great-grandfather, for example, was an artisan, but he had to work in the quarries for many years because that was all the work there was.
Eventually, Fianzi's grandfather traveled the country working on carvings and monuments. One of the things that makes Indiana's limestone different is that it has a lot of flexibility. It's easy to chisel, but it also weathers very well. That made it ideal for buildings such as the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., where there are numerous gargoyles and donor names inscribed in panels. Campbell's Quarry is in the heart of Indiana's limestone belt, where this malleable stone is found.
This whole area is under a big ocean at one point in time, 300 plus million years ago. So that is what initially created the sedimentary deposit of these small sea creatures. Of course, layers and layers of rock and other debris built up over time. And then at some point, the glaciers moved down from the north, and they stopped in around Martinsville.
When the glaciers melted, it exposed a lot of the stone. People realized it would make a good building stone. And in 1827, the first quarry was established just northwest of here in Steinsville.
I get asked quite often how more stone is there. I don't think anybody knows factually what is left. There are estimates from 500 to 1,000 years of the deposit still remaining. A lot of the issue that will come to bear now is encroachment of development, because where the open pit quarries had a lot of property and didn't have to worry so much about buffer zones to neighboring development, now that is becoming more of an issue.
Developments border Campbell's Quarry on the north side and the east side, and there's a highway nearby as well. Overall, though, quarrying is still very active in this part of the state, and the stone is still accessible.
20th Century Fox presents Breaking Away.
In the breaking away sense of the limestone industry, the sort of film version, there's all these abandoned quarries and they're full of students. Well, that's really not the case. People do go and swim in them, but I would say there are many, many more active sites than there are abandoned sites.
In the last decade, a number of old quarries have reopened. It makes sense for folks working in the industry to do this because there can still be stone in the pits, and it costs a lot of money, well into the millions in some cases, to investigate new potential quarries. Campbell, though, plans to preserve his quarry just like this.
Earlier there, you heard Duncan Campbell reference that famous scene in the 1979 movie Breaking Away, where a group of teens is swimming in an abandoned quarry. There's a lot of intrigue surrounding these quarries, and cliff diving has become quite popular. The problem is it's quite dangerous, and just a couple of years ago, someone did die doing it in the quarry that was featured in Breaking Away. That, of course, is part of the reason Campbell wants to keep the location of his quarry hidden.
And this is a reoccurring segment, so if people have an idea for their hidden places, just email news@indianapublicmedia.org.